Great. So today we're talking with Sarah Armstrong-Smith, Chief Security Advisor at Microsoft, who's also featured in our recent CyNam event, exploring the challenges of cybercrime. Sarah's been voted one of the most influential women in UK tech and a top 50 most influential women in cybersecurity. So we're delighted to welcome Sarah. Hello, Sarah.
Hi, Chris. Thank you for having me.
Absolute pleasure. Great to speak with you again. But fantastic. So we'll dive straight in. First area I wanted to talk with you about, if I may, is following on from our CyNam event, looking at cybercrime. It's talking about cybercrime and how big businesses are being targeted by criminals and on an ongoing basis in ever more sophisticated ways. You've held some really senior security positions at Fujitsu previously, and now with Microsoft, advising those major businesses on their cyber risk apertures on several levels. And for the boards of small and larger businesses, what do you think are the top 3 threats that people should be aware of in those strategic and leadership positions within those companies?
Yeah, I think it's really important to sort of start with is, cybercrime, the techniques and tactics are continuing to evolve. Cyber criminals are very opportunistic in terms of how they react to what's going on in the outside world. And they will look for any which way possible to get in. So, as much as we talk about the external threat, we also need to be mindful of the internal threat as well. So I think really it's about having that appreciation for what's going on in the wider world, in the wider market, and how cyber criminals might be taking advantage of that. So actually COVID-19 is a really, really good example of how they change their tactics. So what we've seen is an increase in COVID-19 related phishing laws, fake domains, all of those type of things. So things like phishing is nothing new. It's been around for quite a long time, and it's actually getting harder and harder to detect because they're using that kind of sophistication. It would have been, days of old, it was all about looking for spelling mistakes, or you'd have had the Nigerian prince email, that kind of thing. So actually it's the same risks, but with a different face, if that makes sense. So actually, I think top of the 3 threats really is around phishing campaigns. What we're seeing a big increase on is business email compromise, which is where the cyber criminal will pretend to be someone in authority. So let's say CEO, CFO, for example, and they're trying to extort money. So they're trying to get people within the organization maybe to pay a fake invoice or something like that. And I think what we're seeing is getting more and more prolific is ransomware. And that, again, that ability to extort money or extort information. So I think you've got to be kind of mindful of the fact that there's lots of different types of threats that are going on, but some of them are a continuation of a theme that's always been there as well.
Yeah, it's been really interesting, hasn't it, with COVID-19, how the cyber criminals have adjusted the ways that they're targeting individuals at all levels, whether it's board level or below, and making it very much more specific to what's happening in the wider marketplace. So Microsoft are obviously continuing to take the fight to cyber criminals through a variety of different activities, including their digital crime unit. Do you think we're winning? Is that even something that we can we win? Are we winning, or is it just always going to be that cat and mouse game?
To a certain extent, I think, dare I say, there's no end point. You can't kind of say, right, we've got enough security now, we don't need to kind of invest anymore. But as I was sort of saying, is it's evolving to what's going on in the world. So what we've seen actually even within the last 6 months is a massive push into digital, more services in the cloud. So cyber criminals are taking advantage of, how do I exploit the cloud? How do I exploit the fact that we've got more users working remotely with different types of devices? We've got our IoT, all of those kind of things. Everything is smart these days, and everything is connected to the internet. So As much as we try and, as we evolve the technology, the cyber criminals are also evolving the technology and utilising it to their advantage as well. And I think, when we look at some of the cyber criminals are actually organised, they're organised crime in essence. So some of them are very, very well funded. And what we're actually seeing is they are run as an enterprise. So some of them actually will have, like help desk, for example, which just seems odd, because I think we're used to seeing this sort of image, if you like, as being portrayed by the media, this person in a hoodie in a darkened room. But actually the reality is it's everything from somebody like that in their bedroom right through to state-sponsored attacks and everything else in between. So it does potentially feel like we're always playing catch up. But one of the things that we talk about is really we've kind of gone past that castle and moat type of environment where we're trying to lock everything down and keep everyone out, to this much more open environment that we're working in at the moment. And actually, therefore, one of the things we have to think about is how we change our mindset and how we change the way that we operate. And part of that is that assumed compromise. So for all the best will in the world, for all the technology, for all the process, for all the monitoring, you still have to think that there is probably a back door in somewhere, and they will keep tapping and they'll keep trying and find every which way possible to try and get into your network. So assuming they could get access, what can you do to prevent the movement across your network? How do you protect the data? What is it they're interested in? What are they motivated by? So it's kind of putting all of that into context. So I don't think this, as I said, it's not really an end game. We are playing a little bit of catch up, but I also think there's a lot of an array of technology which is reducing the mean time to detect and mean time to respond. So in terms of, we've got a lot of machine learning capabilities and that kind of thing, which is looking for anomalous behavior. So something that doesn't quite look right. And the quicker we can determine that and the quicker we can respond, the better. And that's a kind of the objective at the moment, is to trying to think about just how do we reduce that mean time to respond and to recover as quickly as possible, assuming that you are being compromised.
Absolutely. So it's much more about managing the risk to an acceptable level rather than completely mitigating it outright.
Yes, it's moving to that kind of resilience perspective. So you can't necessarily prevent every single attack. As we're sort of saying, it's, they're evolving their techniques and tactics and this, that, and the other. What we're trying to do is disrupt what we call their return of investment. So the harder we can make it for them to get access to your network or move across your network, get hold of data, the better, because it just means, the more hard and difficult it is, they may just move on, go somewhere else. But and I think that's the objective, really. So it's around about, how do we utilize the services that we've got to our best advantage, but also trying to think about, what, as I sort of said earlier, what is going on that might make them change tactics as well and their techniques.
Really interesting. So Microsoft have been one of the most innovative technology companies in the world for many years now, and there are some really interesting future technology advancements that are starting to gather pace out there. Do you think there are any future technology advancements that that might be a game changer in fighting cybercrime, such as quantum computing or new ways of communicating, which are, going to lead to better data integrity or ways of doing things? So are there any really future technologies that are going to be a game changer?
A lot of it does come down to automation. So, and the orchestration of the response as well. So what we're trying to do is avoid, if you think about security operations centers and how do we evolve them, there's a lot of potential fatigue through the amount of noise that they're having to work through. So actually what we're trying to do is look at what are the most common threats and actually how can we automate that as much as possible. And it's automating it all the way through the process, if you like. So we're trying to find like the things that are most common and try and deal with those as quickly as possible. Now, the quantum computing thing is quite interesting, and this is where we were talking about, is the fact that when you think about quantum computing, it almost kind of, the whole thing around encryption potentially gets unstuck, because by the use of quantum, as much as an advantage for us to use quantum computing, it's also an advantage to cyber criminals as well, because they can potentially break a code in minuscule time. So actually that traditional data encryption, the traditional hashing of passwords, that kind of thing, they can be broken really quickly. So actually you then have to have another method of encryption. So each technology has its advantage, but it also has its disadvantage, as you sort of say, in the hands of cyber criminals. It's like we were sort of saying is, there's that kind of get to the point where you're looking at artificial intelligence versus artificial intelligence. And there's that kind of argument about whether you could actually take the human out of the equation altogether, which we don't advocate for. We think that the human element is actually really, really important to the whole cyber chain, if you like, because it's that being able to sort of look at that big picture and see what's going on. And as we know, no technology is infallible. So even when we're looking at, potentially utilizing AI or machine learning, all these type of things, they've got biases also built into them as well. So actually we have to have that human layer, and the technology is just an enabler to that human layer.
So we're talking about augmented rather than artificial intelligence.
Exactly.
In many ways. So really cool. And yeah, going back to the automation piece, we have seen a number of our clients actually very interested in Microsoft Sentinel as a solution, and seeing that being a real uptake. So it's really good to see that the Microsoft are continuing that that offering into the cybersecurity world. Brilliant.